Why are you talking to my son? The voice cut through the silence like a cold blade, slicing the still air inside the $40 million mansion. The sharp clap of Louboutin heels on marble echoed like a gavel, slamming against the doors of prejudice. Victoria Blackwell, 38, heiress to a pharmaceutical empire, stood imposingly at the top of the staircase. Her eyes, laced with suspicion, scanned the scene that made her chest tighten with unease. A black woman in a blue cleaning apron crouched on the floor, beside her 7-year-old son, Oliver. The same Oliver who hadn't spoken a single word in 2 years. Lana Santos, 34, slowly rose to her feet. Her hands still gripped a bottle of floor cleaner, like a shield, like camouflage. For 3 months, she had worked here, always quiet, always invisible, until now. I'm sorry, Mrs. Blackwell, I was just what? Victoria snapped, her tone sharp and bristling. Oliver doesn't talk to anyone. Anyone. And now I walk in and see you. What? Filling his head with something? Oliver didn't move. He stayed seated, his ocean blue eyes gazing upward, holding a picture book in Italian. But what shook Victoria to the core wasn't the book. It was the light in his eyes, a flicker of awareness, of thought, something she hadn't seen in so long. It wasn't illness. It was intelligence, waiting to be unlocked. Lana didn't lower her gaze. She stood tall, her eyes calm, like a lake after a storm, and spoke in a soft but steady voice. I was just cleaning, and he came over. Half truth, half protection. The truth was, for weeks now, Lana had noticed something in Oliver's eyes whenever she muttered a few words in French or whispered a Spanish phrase while scrubbing the floor. His eyes lit up, not like a child hearing a strange sound, but like a soul rediscovering a language long buried inside him. Yesterday, when she absent-mindedly said, "Bonjour, mon petit," he responded, soft as a breeze, but unmistakable. "Merci, madame." 2 words, simple, brief. But to Lana, it was an earthquake. Victoria yanked the book from her son's hands. Italian? Where did this come from? The library, ma'am. I was just organizing. And you thought you had the right to use my son as some kind of experiment? Her voice cracked like a whip. He's severely autistic. He doesn't talk. He doesn't learn. He doesn't respond. 3 of the best doctors confirmed that. Lana clenched her fists, not from anger, but from memory. She had seen that look before. That way, the world stamps "impossible" on a child's forehead, just because they couldn't understand a different kind of language. And she, once a professor at 3 universities, was now just a nameless shadow with a mop. But in that namelessness, she had seen something no one else dared to see. "Listen to me," Victoria said, enunciating each word like a warning. "I didn't hire you to chat with my son. You're the help. You clean. You are not a teacher. You are not a doctor. And you are certainly not some kind of language specialist." Lana didn't flinch, didn't lower her head, didn't justify herself. She just stood there, spine straight, eyes steady, watching Oliver. The boy now ran his fingers along the page, tracing each image as if they could speak back. "Stay away from him," Victoria snapped. "No words, no glances. If I ever see you in the same room as my son again, you're out, immediately." She turned, her voice still cutting like steel. "I'll have Sandra reassign your duties. From now on, basement and service wing only. You are not to set foot in the main house." Lana nodded. No protest, but not submissive either. She said just one thing, calm, gentle, a melody in stark contrast to the shouting that had just filled the room. With all due respect, Mrs. Blackwell, sometimes children don't need to be taught. They just need to be heard in a language they understand. Victoria let out a bitter laugh. And you think you understand that better than 3 world-class doctors? A cleaning lady thinks she can heal? Lana said nothing. She turned and walked away, leaving behind a silence so thick it pulsed. But in that silence, something had begun. In Oliver's mind, language was taking shape, and the only person who had ever listened was her. That afternoon, as the sunlight faded into pale gold beams cutting across the dusty storage cellar, Lana was organizing bottles and cleaning supplies when footsteps echoed down the stairs. Not Sandra, not Victoria. It was Dr. Marcus Chun, the family's private pediatrician. He looked around cautiously, as if afraid someone might see him. Then he spoke, softly. "Sorry to bother you, Ms. Santos. I need to speak with you, privately, about Oliver." Lana set down her cloth. Her gaze stayed calm. "Is something wrong, doctor?" "Quite the opposite," he replied. "I heard it with my own ears." Voice. He spoke French, clearly, fluently. "Do you realize that's the first time in 2 years he's spoken voluntarily? No coercion, no prompting." Lana paused, then took a slow, deep breath. Something in Dr. Chun's expression felt trustworthy. "If I told you I hold a PhD in applied linguistics from Columbia University, that I spent 5 years researching language development in neurodiverse children, that I've published 17 international studies, and worked hands-on with 43 cases just like Oliver, what would you think?" Dr. Chun froze. "Are you serious?" "I've never lied," Lana said gently. "I've just never been asked." He bowed his head, not in shame, but in respect. For the first time, someone in this house truly listened to her. And for the first time, someone saw Oliver, not as something broken to be fixed, but as a mind waiting to be unlocked. That night, after everyone in the mansion had retired to their rooms, Lana sat alone in the cold, dim basement. On her old phone, she dialed a number she hadn't dared call in over 2 years. The line connected. A deep male voice answered. "Williams speaking." She bit her lip, her voice trembling just slightly. "James, it's me, Lana Santos." There was a pause, then the sound of someone jolting upright on the other end. "Lana? My God, where have you been? Your research was just cited in 3 top scientific journals. Harvard's been looking for you for 6 months." "I'm in a temporary situation," Lana said softly. "But I need something. Everything we compiled on intervention for children with mutism, especially the final year protocol I developed. I've got a very special case." Williams didn't press. He simply replied, "I'll send it tonight." And Lana, "Welcome back." She ended the call, gripping the phone tight. Not from nerves, but because, for the first time in months, hope had returned. Clear, certain, like a language she hadn't dared name, until now. But what she didn't know. Upstairs, behind a hallway wall, Sandra, the housekeeper, had accidentally overheard the tail end of the call. She narrowed her eyes, took a silent step back, and in her mind, something began to twist. Not from curiosity, but from envy. A maid, bringing a rich kid back to speech. That couldn't be allowed. Number not in this house. 15 minutes after Sandra's frantic knock on the door, Lana was summoned to the office. Victoria stood behind her desk, face cold as marble, eyes blazing. Her laptop sat open, turned toward Lana. On the screen, An official faculty profile from Columbia University. Photo of Lana. Full name, Dr. Luana Santos. A long list of research papers, awards, and international publications on linguistics and autism. Victoria didn't shout. She didn't need to. Her voice was cold enough to suck the oxygen from the room. So, you're a doctor, a PhD, and you let me believe you were just a maid? You dared deceive me? Lana stood straight, calm as ever. I never deceived anyone. No one ever asked. Victoria slammed her hand on the desk. You know what I hate more than anything? Being lied to. Lana gave the faintest nod, then lifted her gaze, steady, direct, not defiant, but truthful. You never looked at me long enough to see who I was. To you, I've always been just a shadow in an apron, quietly scrubbing away the mess other people left behind. So I learned to stay silent, because for women like me, black, without titles, silence is how we survive. Victoria froze, not because of the words, but because for the first time, she realized she had never truly listened. The office door burst open. Oliver, the boy who had always cowered behind grown-ups, now came running in, eyes glowing, his smile impossible to contain. Lana, he shouted in Spanish, then instantly switched to French. J'apprends les chansons. And finally, in Portuguese, Posso aprender mais palavras hoje? Can I learn more words today? Victoria was stunned, speechless. Dr. Chun stepped in right behind him, holding a tablet. He didn't say a word, just set it on the desk and pressed play. The screen lit up with discreetly recorded clips. Oliver counting to 10 in German, reciting the Mandarin alphabet, singing a children's song in Arabic. Dr. Chun turned to Victoria. 3 weeks. In just 3 weeks, Oliver has absorbed the foundations of 7 languages, understood grammatical patterns, and begun developing natural language reflexes. All of it, under Lana's quiet guidance, with my full medical supervision. Victoria couldn't speak. She could only stare at her son, the boy she thought had gone silent forever, now flipping through a picture book, murmuring Italian phrases with radiant focus. My son, she whispered, her voice cracking. He can speak, and he's good at it. Lana gently knelt beside Oliver. He's not broken, Mrs. Blackwell. Just waiting, she said, for a language the world never tried to understand. Victoria dropped to her knees, not from shock, but because her son was looking at her, directly, clearly, with eyes full of presence and forgiveness. Oliver hesitated, then stepped closer, and in English, the very first language he had once abandoned, he whispered, Mom. I tried to speak, but every time I opened my mouth, you looked sad. I didn't want to make you sad anymore, so I stopped. His words didn't pierce Victoria's heart like a knife. They sank in, softly, but left a fracture so deep it would never fully close. For 2 years she had cared for her son, through the lens of fear. Fear that he'd suffer. Fear that he wasn't like the other kids, and that fear, not any diagnosis, was what had sealed Oliver's silence. Victoria reached out, brushing her fingers gently across his cheek. I'm sorry, she choked. I didn't know. I truly didn't know. She turned to Lana, and in her eyes, every trace of pride, superiority, and distance had fallen away. Please don't leave, not as a cleaner, not as a worker, but as the woman who gave me back my son. Lana smiled, not a triumphant smile, but the quiet smile of someone who had once been lost and had now helped a child be found. A child seen for the first time, and a mother who, at last, had learned to listen. Lana stayed silent for a few seconds, her eyes still fixed on Oliver, who was now sitting on the carpet, quietly arranging colorful blocks in the order of the Japanese alphabet he'd memorized on his own. Then she turned back to Victoria. Her voice was soft, like a lullaby, but firm, like a promise. "Before I answer you, there's something you need to understand." Victoria nodded, her gaze still locked on her son. "Oliver isn't a miracle. He's not some breakthrough case for your science journals, and he's definitely not an inspirational story for the media to chew up and spit out." Lana took one step forward. Her face was full of emotion, but not fragile. "He's a child, with real feelings, real fears, and a brilliant mind that no one ever bothered to see. And the only reason he's gotten this far? It wasn't me. It was safety. It was silence instead of judgment. It was, finally, someone willing to listen in his language." Victoria swallowed hard, her eyes turning red. "If I stay," Lana went on, "it'll be under one condition. Don't turn Oliver into a trophy. Don't love him for what he can do. Love him for who he is." Victoria looked at her son, who was now giggling softly as he finished spelling the word kärlek in Swedish. Love. She gave a small nod. No longer the proud matriarch, just a mother who'd just learned her very first lesson about unconditional love. 6 months later, the Blackwell estate was no longer a silent castle echoing with footsteps and always shut doors. It had transformed into a home. Mornings began with the sound of Oliver's laughter echoing through the living room as he counted numbers in Japanese with the gardener. By lunchtime, he'd switch to French to chat with Lana, then mumble bits of German while playing word games with his mother. 9 languages, each one a bridge, each one proof that Oliver's mind had never been lacking, just never truly connected. Victoria now worked from the back porch, but her eyes always followed her son, with a gaze full of awe and quiet gratitude. And Lana? She stood behind the camera, recording content for the YouTube channel Learning with Oliver, where she shared her methods of teaching neurodivergent children through language and emotional connection. In just 4 months, the channel had grown to over 2 million followers. Educational organizations from around the world began reaching out. Parents sent letters, messages of thanks. But the one that moved Lana most had nothing to do with numbers or praise. It was a comment from a mother in India. "For the first time in 3 years, my daughter said the word Mama. Because of Oliver, because of you. Because some flames are sparked in places no one ever thought could hold light." One April afternoon, as golden sunlight poured into the living room like warm honey, Dr. Marcus Chun walked into the Blackwell estate, a thick stack of letters in hand, and a grin he could no longer contain. "Good news, ladies," he announced, placing the envelopes onto the mahogany table. Victoria looked up. Lana paused mid-edit, her fingers frozen on the manuscript. Harvard, Stanford, Columbia, 3 of the world's most prestigious universities, had all extended official invitations to Dr. Luana Santos, the same woman who once scrubbed the floors of this mansion in silence. But that wasn't all. The manuscript she'd written through countless long nights beside Oliver had sparked a bidding war among 3 of the biggest publishing houses. In the end, Penguin Random House secured the rights with a language of the heart deal. How multilingualism heals the neurodivergent child. The book hadn't even launched, and it was already #1 on Amazon's pre-order charts. Victoria looked at Lana with a kind of reverence she didn't try to hide. "I used to think I knew what success looked like," she said softly, "but now I realize True success is when wisdom finds a place to bloom. Lana smiled, a quiet smile that said more than words ever could, because she knew the greatest things often begin in the smallest of places, like an old forgotten basement, or the eyes of a child the world chose not to see. It was a quiet morning. Oliver was teaching Swedish vocabulary to the new cook, his voice light and cheerful. Victoria stepped out onto the porch, a cup of tea in hand, her gaze distant. "I heard Sandra still hasn't found a job," she said, more to herself than to anyone else. Lana, who was organizing materials for her next live stream, looked up. Her expression held no bitterness, no satisfaction, just calm. "Word is," Victoria continued, her voice lower now, "some of the more respectable families turned her down. No one wants to hire a maid known for spying on her employers and spreading lies about them online." Lana gave a quiet smile, not smug, not triumphant, just at peace. "Some lessons," she said softly, "don't need to be taught. They arrive on their own, when the time is right." Then she turned back to her books, her hands moving, with the same grace she once used to wipe these floors, on her very first day here. "Karma," she added almost to herself, "has its own schedule. Never early, never late, but always right on time." Victoria watched her, a strange knot tightening in her chest, admiration and shame, because the woman she once treated as invisible was the very one who taught her the most profound lesson about kindness, patience, and justice that needs no sword. It was a Friday afternoon. Lana was helping Oliver practice Hebrew pronunciation through a children's song, his voice sweet and careful with each new word. That's when Dr. Marcus Chun appeared on the front porch, carrying an overstuffed leather briefcase and a look on his face that was somewhere between disbelief and awe. "We did it," he said, his voice trembling with emotion. Victoria stepped out with a glass of orange juice in hand, frowning slightly. "Did what exactly?" Dr. Chun opened the briefcase, pulled out a thick silver and white scientific journal, Nature Neuroscience. On the cover, in bold black type, multilingual stimulation and selective mutism recovery, a case study with groundbreaking implications, co-authored by Dr. Luana Santos and Dr. Marcus Chun. "That's not all," he added. "The American Academy of Pediatrics just sent an official invitation. They want Lana to speak at the National Conference on Language Intervention for Neurodivergent Children. They want to hear this method. They want to bring it to public schools across the entire country." Victoria turned to Lana, and this time her eyes held more than admiration. They held gratitude. Lana took the journal into her hands, flipping through its pages as if touching a part of a dream she once thought she had to give up. From a cold basement to a national stage, from a nameless housemaid to someone reshaping how the world understands a child. She had crossed every boundary, not with a shout, but with the quiet whisper of belief. That evening, under the warm golden light of the living room, Oliver placed a sheet of paper on the table, carefully smoothing out the folds. He turned to face his mother and Lana, his eyes shining but steady. "Mom, Miss Lana, I wrote a letter. I want to read it." Victoria gave a small nod, her heart swelling with a kind of pride she hadn't felt in years. Oliver took a breath. Then he spoke, not just in language, but in feeling. "I used to feel like I was living inside a glass box. I could see everyone, but no one could hear me. Everyone thought I didn't want to speak, didn't understand, wasn't normal." He looked up, his eyes on his mother. "Mom, I know you love me. But you were always sad when I tried to talk, so I got scared. I thought, maybe if I stayed silent, you wouldn't hurt anymore." Victoria broke, tears falling too fast to wipe away. Oliver continued, gently taking Lana's hand. "Miss Lana didn't break the glass box around me. She showed me there was never a box. She taught me I've always had a voice, and I don't need to be normal, because I was already whole, from the very beginning." He finished, then looked up at the two women who had changed his life. "Thank you, Mom, for letting Miss Lana teach me. And thank you, Miss Lana, for seeing me. Even before
At the main auditorium
of the
International
Conference on Special Education, the lights shone bright on the grand stage, where thousands of teachers, scientists, and parents from around the world waited in hushed anticipation. An 8-year-old boy, dressed in a tiny gray suit, stepped up to the podium. Beside him stood a woman the world once overlooked. Now she was the keynote speaker, Dr. Luana Santos. The microphone crackled softly to life. Oliver smiled, then began. "My name is Oliver Blackwell. A year ago, doctors said I would never speak normally. Today." He switched to French. "Je parle 9 langues différentes. I speak 9 different languages." Then Spanish. "Gracias a una mujer que creyó en mí. Thank you to a woman who believed in me." Then German, Japanese, Arabic. Each word, each syllable, rang out like a declaration to the world. There is no such thing as a voiceless child. Only adults who haven't yet learned how to listen. The audience erupted, hundreds rising to their feet, applause thundering like a wave, tears falling freely across the rows. Lana stepped forward, taking the microphone. Her voice was calm, steady, like stone that has survived every storm. "There was a time," she said, "when I was invisible, because of my skin, because of my title, because of the work I did." She paused, then looked down at the boy beside her. "But today I stand here, not because I changed, but because someone, a child, listened to me before the world ever did." The auditorium fell utterly silent, not for lack of words, but because everyone in that room knew, without question. They had just witnessed history. 2 years later, the Blackwell estate, once a house of silence and echoing footsteps, had become the headquarters of the Oliver and Lana Foundation, a nonprofit that had helped over 10,000 neurodivergent children across the U.S. find their voice. Oliver, now 10 years old, was the global face of multidimensional language intervention. He appeared on international educational programs and delivered speeches at the United Nations, using 3 languages in a single address. Victoria, the mother who once feared her son's difference, had become the largest private donor to inclusive education. She poured millions into building support centers for neurodiverse children, naming them the language within. When asked why, she answered, "Because sometimes all a child needs is one person who believes their voice deserves to be heard." In a special interview, when asked whether she ever wished to take revenge on those who once looked down on her, Lana simply smiled. Number. I never needed revenge, because the greatest way to defeat prejudice isn't to crush it. It's to build something so beautiful, it has no choice but to recognize you. In a world that once rendered her invisible, her presence had now changed thousands of lives. And it all began with a boy who didn't speak, but always had something worth hearing.